So tonight's presentation is on supports for people moving out of their house and also transitioning primary supports away from family members, or from parents at least, to other people who can do long-term supports. So we're going to start off the presentation with a little bit about the difference between reactive planning and proactive planning. With reactive planning, I've spent enough time with families in my work. I work here at the Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, working with families through the transition program. I've also worked extensively with different regional center services, and so for many years I've worked with people with disabilities and their family, and I've spent enough time with families to just get a glimpse of how difficult people's lives are. By the time that you've finished with school, the number of issues that you've had to tackle, the number of meetings you've had to sit through, the number of challenges you've had to overcome is enormous. And then when people finally finish the school process, then there's the enormous challenge of finding work or meaningful day programs. And this issue of assisting your loved ones from moving from your house or getting the primary supports from you as a parent, and making that transition is one that I understand very, very easily can be pushed further and further down the road, because there is so much that people are dealing with, and I fully understand that. But the one thing I would encourage people is to consider what happens if that process of being pushed down the road gets pushed too far down the road, and you end up in a situation where you are reacting to crisis, and people are having to make that transition without the supports that they would really deserve, and also without being able to find the appropriate types of services that would support them well. Having a family member, a person who knows our loved ones and can support them through that process, guide them through the process, assist people with finding the new supports that will be available to them, is an enormous gift. And in contrast, doing it without that support is really, really challenging. So if we're not careful, the two kinds of placeholder plans that people can develop are, one, the if something were to happen to me plan. And I hear this a lot from families, and again, it's not a criticism. I understand it. But of course, there is no if and were. Something will happen. And so the issue is, can we do this now? Can we make the plans now? The sibling succession plan is one that I hear as well. And the basic idea here is that after the parents are no longer able to support the person, the sibling will take over that role, either through the person moving into the sibling's house, or the sibling just taking over the supervision or guidance or support that the parents usually do. But without proper planning and proper implementation, the sibling support or sibling succession kind of a plan has its problems too. Because although many siblings who I know want to do this, they want to be supportive of their family members who have disabilities, but the agreement that they make is oftentimes made in kind of the abstract, and life is also very changing, for the siblings as well. People get married, they get divorced, they have kids, they get jobs, they move away, and so this is a really tentative plan. And the one thing that I always encourage people is, if this is the plan, is when will this be started? Again, if you wait until the parents are no longer there and there is a crisis, how difficult this is for everyone involved because they're dealing with their own crisis at that point. And there's many things that parents have learned through the years and years of support that the siblings may not be aware of. And so the idea of starting this and starting the siblings becoming more active, if this is the plan, is for them to start becoming more active in this while the parents are still able to guide this process, and that relationship of support can be nurtured. That would be the ideal for that to be the process. One other thing I'd like to mention is this idea of transplant shock. Many of us, if we own a car, if we drive a car, we can move 20, 30 miles away from where we're currently living and have almost no difference in our life. Almost no difference in our life. If you are reliant on buses, moving a mile away can have dramatic impact. And if you're also reliant upon specific services, they may be restricted geographically as well. And so one of the concerns that I have with some of the plans that I hear is the idea that, again, in a time of crisis, the person will be moved during that time away from their communities, away from their support people, away from from their friends, and that will be the time when everything happens. And so one of the things that I very much encourage is that if this is the model, if we can do it in a point where again, there is plenty of support and also just a realization of what would happen if the person actually needs to move from their community, or even, like I said, just a relative short distance away. So proactive planning. One of the first things that to be successful with proactive planning is starting early. And this doesn't mean necessarily that the person actually moves early, but that the seed of this idea that people won't live with their parents, or that they won't have their parents there as the person providing the primary support, that seed would be planted early. For some people, that's going to be when the kid is young. And for some people, for a variety of reasons, that may come as a later discussion. And so when I say early, I'm talking relative terms there. I'd like to just kind of give an example. My father had an interesting tradition when I was growing up. From the time that I was young, every birthday, the tradition was that he would come to the birthday person's plate and pick up their plate and hold it to the face and say, "On your 18th birthday, I dropped this plate." And as a 5-year-old, that was a little bit traumatic. But the helpful thing for that was that it really did give us an idea that we were going to be transitioning out of that house, not just sometime in our life, but early in our life. And so that tradition is one that I found and I think is very helpful. And I've actually talked to several parents who kind of use a variety of that same strategy. Another strategy that my parents used was about the time each kid became 15 or 16 years old. Birthday and Christmas gifts turned into plates, cups, towels, linens, lamps. I still have the cast iron that I received on my 16th or 17th birthday, and I still use that cast iron. So that idea, again, of planting that seed is one that can start in a variety of ways. And you don't need to have all the details worked out. This isn't necessarily saying, when the kids are little, when you are this age, this is where you'll be living. You don't need to have those details. But it's also just a realization for both the parents and the children to just have that really clear mindset that not only is it maybe not the best idea for us to continue this process, but reality, at some point in your life, we are not going to be there to support you in the same way, and we need to start recognizing that. The second part of proactive planning is learning about your options, and frankly, this is where I believe our system falls short. To effectively plan for the future, it's very helpful for when kids and families have young ones. It's very helpful to know what are the supports that will be available to you when this child grows up. You know, we don't do retirement planning by waiting until we retire to start figuring out, you know, what our saving needs to be. It's the same issue here. If we give people the information about the types of supports that are available when kids are young, then that provides parents and the kids with a mindset of, this is where I can go, and these are the kinds of skills that I need to learn and I need to focus on. The other thing I'd like to say about this, learning about your options, is that the information that you get about this may not come from the actual service system, but you have a network of parents that you've worked with. You have a network of professional allies who work with you, and the idea of tapping into that network and using that network to get a sense of what are the supports that other people are using, what are the strategies that people are using, tapping into that network and creating your own circle of support, and really getting a sense of what's working for other people, that can be an effective way of learning about your options and making plans. I'd also suggest that people set clear goals and objectives. We do this all the time in many parts of our services industry, but for families it can be really helpful. What is the dream? What would you like to see, for your son or daughter as far as where they're living? What is important in a housing setting? What's important in terms of support that will be set up? Where will the person live? What's a rough target age that we would like to make that transition? What skills need to be learned, and when will they be practiced? And so setting up these clear goals and objectives can be a real helpful way of again, moving towards proactive planning. Create some tension if necessary. One of the things that's interesting, there's some parents I've been talking to and talking about the fact that for at least some people, they've become very comfortable living at home. And so there was a question about, like, if that's the situation, then what is the incentive for someone to say we're going to move out? For some people, this is a natural drive, and it's never an issue. But one of the things that I like to ask is, what's the routine in the house? Are people being expected to contribute to the extent that they can? If you're in a situation to where people have tons of free time and the meals magically appear, the laundry's put into the drawer, and all those things are happening for people, then not only is there not an incentive to move out, but people are also not having the opportunity to practice those skills that they're going to need at some point anyway. And so, I really encourage people to think about what is their situation, how are things working, and especially, again, if things are really cozy, maybe introducing some less coziness to that situation by really expecting that people would be contributing to the extent that people can. So the last point is implementing while able to guide the process. As I, earlier within this talk, I was talking about the fact that having the parents be available to guide this process, to really assist people with thinking about the plans, to use all of the resources and knowledge that you've accumulated throughout the support that you've provided to kids, and using that in a very constructive way and making a very planned type of move is something that I really encourage families to consider. One of the things that I think is really important to focus on is that this is not just between you and your child. The people who are going to pick up that support role, they need that time to have that support shaped by the people who know and have experience with supporting people. And so this is, this ability to guide this process is one that really it works on all levels. It works for the parents, and it reduces, the stress and tension for the parents. It reduces the stress and tension oftentimes for people with disabilities, and gives them a clear idea of where they are headed. But also, I just can't emphasize, as a support provider, the importance of having the families to give that information and to help shape the types of supports that we provide to the people that we're supporting.
I'm just going to talk about the independent living and what is our philosophy. I'm going to go ahead and talk about our history first. The birth of the independent living movement has been attributed to a group of students. So this is how it all started, which is the independent living with a group of UC Davis, Berkeley. These are persons who have a disability, and our agency do work with persons with disability. Not that we just don't work with just one disability, but we work with all forms of disability, as well as for age and gender. So we just don't target just one disability. And I'm just going to go over this information with everyone. In 1962, the first severely disabled student was admitted to UC Davis, Berkeley. By 1969, the number of students with severe disability had increased to 12. The UC hospitals surrounding were familiar to the new tenant, who had spent countless days and nights in custodial institution. A sense of unity and self-confidence developed as the residents live in close, continuing contact with each other. As they become more aware of the degree to which control over their lives had been taken over by medical and rehabilitation professionals, the students drew on their own experience to develop a philosophy of independent living. The students believed that they didn't need to change to become integrated, but rather the environment and the attitudes toward persons with disabilities needed to change. The core of these students move on to start the Center of the Independent Living in Berkeley. Since the founding of Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, 28 other independent living centers have taken shape across California and many more in the United States, bring these philosophies to their consumer base. So this is the independent living philosophy. The philosophy is the entire focus of the independent living movement is to realization that freedom to make choices and the ability to live in the community is the basis of civil right that should be extended to all people regardless of disability. With this framework, independent living center staff work with and for the consumer to promote his or her independence in the community. And this is our agency's mission, ARIA, which is the acronym for our agency. You may hear a lot of the acronyms. So ARIA, which stands for Resources for Independent Living. Our mission statement is to promote the psychoeconomic independence of persons with disability by providing peer support, consumer-directed independent living services, and advocacy. Now, our agency, we do serve Sacramento County and Yolo County. We've been serving consumers since 1976. So we do have staff member who works in Yolo County. In case of we do have other consumers who is in that county, they can still be served in the Yolo County and as well as in Sacramento County. But the main office will be in Sacramento. Our agency do provide 7 core services to independent living. The services that we provide is that we help consumers with advocacy and legislative monitoring. We help consumers with finding housing, finding personal assistance services, providing information and referral, peer counseling, independent living skills training, and assistive technology. Some of the example would be housing, which we do get a lot of consumers who are looking for housing. And we know that there's no affordable housing or accessible housing as well. And a lot of consumer comes to our door. Like one example is, I'm looking for housing, I'm looking for a studio for a 1-bedroom, but I don't have an income. And we all know that you have to have an income to find housing. And it's not to say that we're going to turn consumer away and say, sorry, we can't find you anything, but how can we help? Maybe the first goal is to get an income first. Your second goal is to get housing. So those are some of the examples. And the other example will be assistive technology. Does anybody know what assistive technology is? Some of you guys do know, okay. So in case if everyone's not familiar with assistive technology, I will be going to all the information here as well. Dogfight, that's the acronym. And it's not dogfight, okay, everyone? It's not that we're going to have dogfight at our office. It actually stands for Disability Organizing Group for Initiative to Total Equity. This is to improve quality health care, as well as for in-home supportive services, which is IHSS, and improve affordable and accessible housing, to promote individual rights and liberty, and to also support transportation as well, and anyone in transition to immigration rights. So this group, this is what we call an advocacy group. This group is not run by our staff members, but it is run by consumers. So it would be like the consumers who are here today. You guys are the voice. We will be the one that's going to be supporting you. So this is an advocacy group that we run. We do focus, like I mentioned earlier, we focus a lot on SSI. We focus on in-home supportive services, public transportation, affordable and accessible housing, and as well as for health care. So if we know that anyone who is interested in these issues, we want them to be our advocate. Just not to say they represent resources for independent living, but they also represent persons who have a disability. And this is Assistive Technology, or the acronym just AT. Assistive Technology assists persons with disability to live and work as independently as possible. We also are connected with Ability Tools. AT Network used to be the old name, but the new name is called Ability Tools. So let's just say if you're looking for some kind of services, you're looking for some ATs. So if you're looking for, let's just say, someone who is going to be wanting to loan a wheelchair, for an example. So you can go in here and just type go to the category that you looking for, or what you're looking for. They also have other resources here as well. Now, the eligibility for the services is that you must have a disability. Like I said, we do work with persons who have a disability, but we do, even if you can self-identify yourself, even if you say that I don't have a disability, or, I'm not on SSI, most of the consumers, we get those answers a lot where they're saying that, I'm not on an SSI, so I don't have a disability. But if we go in deeper, some consumers might have anxiety, or consumers might have a depression, and they say that that's not a disability. But if it affects the way you live your life, and where it's not, you're not living your life as independently, we will consider that as a disability, but it's still the consumer's choice. Now, our eligibility is that if you wanted to just come in as a walk-in, we have walk-in services every Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 11:30 or from 1:30 to 3:30. That is for all consumers just to walk in without an appointment. But if you would like to be assigned to a independent living specialist, that's the title of our staff members. We're not social workers here. We're independent living specialists, and we're here to help consumers to achieve their goal. So independent living does require that consumers need to participate in their goal. Not to say that we don't care, because consumers, they need to care about their goal. This is their goal, and we're here to provide them the resources. And one thing with our agency here is that our staff members, our board members, they are consumers as well. I mean, we also can consider them as consumers, but we are employees, or they are our bosses. But they are also have a disability. So our agency here, we may not look like we don't have a disability, but our staff members, each one have a disability. Our board members are also persons who have a disability. So that's why we are connected to consumers who we know in their shoes. So we're just kind of like we're in their shoes and we know. And that's one really unique about our agency, is that it is run by staff members who have a disability, and also board members who are also has a disability.
My name's Anne. I'm an attorney at Disability Rights California here in Sacramento. DRC is a statewide organization that represents individuals with disabilities in legal issues. So, wide range of legal issues. Today I'm going to be talking about in-home supportive services, but if you or your loved one have another legal issue, feel free to give us a call. It may not be an issue that we can handle, but we can at least give you a referral. We work primarily in healthcare issues, mental health, special education and youth issues, employment and work issues, voting, and discrimination. So I'm going to go through what IHSS is, who is eligible for the program, how you can apply and the process for applying, services that are covered and paid for under IHSS, the process through the application where you get a notice of action, as well as what to do if you disagree with the state's determination. And finally, some kind of just current trends of things that we've been seeing in this program. All right? So what is IHSS? Handout says, IHSS is the largest publicly funded non-medical service program to help people with disabilities remain in their homes. That's true. In more general terms, though, IHSS is a Medi-Cal funded program that provides support for individuals with disabilities to live in their homes by providing services and supports of a non-medical nature that are are in many cases what allow people to stay in their home or go back to their own home. And we'll talk about some more of the services that are covered, but things as basic as doing the dishes, helping someone get dressed, to more complicated things like giving medications or giving insulin. Who is eligible? As I said, this is a Medi-Cal funded program, and so it needs to be a person who gets or is eligible for Medi-Cal. But in order to get IHSS, the individual does have to be Medi-Cal eligible. They have to live in their own home, or we can talk, there's a second part where if they're still in an institution. And they can, or it's not necessary, but often will get SSI. It is possible to have Medi-Cal with the share of cost and to still get IHSS. It's also possible if you're in any kind of Medi-Cal. So if you're in the Working Disabled program and are getting Medi-Cal through that, you can get IHSS. If you're in the new Affordable Care Act Medi-Cal, you can get IHSS through that. The only other exception is that if you are in an institution or a facility, normally the rules are you have to be in your own home. However, if you or your loved one is in a facility and would like to leave, and there is a belief that that person can live safely on their own, the county can come out and do an assessment for what your needs would be to allow you to move home. The last thing I'll say on that is when a person is in a facility, if they are a minor. Normally, if the person with a disability is a minor, their parents' income is deemed to them, so it determines their financial eligibility. However, if they're in an institution or would be institutionally eligible, then that changes their financial eligibility. I won't go into that very much, but if that's something that affects you, we can talk about it more. So if you want to apply, how do you do it? First step, get Medi-Cal if you don't have it. But if not, go down, once you have it, go to your county welfare office or give them a call. They'll have, every county has an IHSS program. What you're going to want to do is set up a face-to-face, in-person assessment with someone from the IHSS program. And they are going to come out to your home and meet with you and your loved ones or your friends or whoever is helping you, and get an idea of what your needs are. The first step is determining whether or not you would be eligible. And they're going to look at, are you at risk of leaving home if they don't come in and provide this service? That's kind of the baseline. If they feel that you are, then they start to look at what services do you need? Do you need cooking services? Do you need help with laundry? And what are your limitations that may make it harder for you to do those things? After you do the initial application, you will be reassessed every year. Because although, some disabilities stay the same, some things change, and people's needs change, and people's houses change. They're going to look at who lives with you. What kind of space do you have that might keep it safe? And what are your needs and the setup that will allow you to stay at home? Because that's always what we get back to, is a goal of what services and supports can be put in to allow people to remain in the community, if possible. So if you're going through this process and you're going to do an assessment, we always encourage everyone, one, take a look at our website. We have a lot of great materials on there, particularly about helping you get ready for your assessment. We encourage people to make a log. So go through, if say you take care of your sister, make a daily log of all the things that you do for your sister. And specifically, how long does it take you to do each of those jobs? Because that's what this is all going to be based on. At the end of the day, they're going to figure out that Susie needs 150 hours a month of this type of care in order to remain safely at home. And so you want to make sure that you're getting credit for all of the hours of things that you do. So we have a worksheet that we encourage people to use. We also have packets that are called functional self-limitation packets, and ones to give to your medical providers. Because part of the application process, they're going to want information from your doctors. It's required in order to do the process. And although they do have a duty to send out that information, the sheet that they send to your doctors is like 1 inch, gives them about 1 inch to describe what's going on with you. We give them a 15-page thing to try to make it as clear as possible, all the things that you need. And that may mean a little extra time, going in and meeting with your doctor and talking about, all right, why do I really need help with my laundry? Is it because I have a problem with my back and I can't bend over? Are there some parts of doing my laundry that I can do? And make sure that all of that is documented. So if take nothing else, step 1 is document everything. And I'll put step 2 a little bit later. We encourage people to have someone come with them, or have someone there at the assessment, even if it's not someone who would be a provider for you. And if it's just your friend or your neighbor, but it can be a very intimidating process, and you want to make sure that all the information is going out. I mean, I know personally, I advocate for people every day, but when I go in for medical things, I have my partner or someone else come with me, because I don't want to mess up because I'm trying to be nice to the person for myself. And it gets you a little more information and evidence should you have to challenge the decision that the county social worker is going to make. All right, I want to talk a little bit about covered services. So I've mentioned, a few different things, cooking, cleaning generally. And they generally break them up into a few different groups. There's what they call personal care assistance. And so that's things like bathing. It's also bowel and bladder care. It can be assisting someone in the bathroom. It can be doing anything. It's personal things, put it that way. There's domestic services, as well as what they call related services, which include preparing for meals, going shopping, doing the laundry, helping someone go to a medical appointment. If you need someone to take you to the doctor, how long does it take you to get there? Unfortunately, right now you do not get time for the amount spent at the doctor, but that's a longer story. It's the travel to the doctor and the travel back from the doctor is covered. There are a couple of big ones that people tend to, that there's more confusion about and more arguments about, so I want to spend more time on those. The first one is protective supervision. Protective supervision is available for someone who needs care 24 hours a day because they are what the state calls not self-directing. And so because of a memory or judgment problem, they could put themselves into a dangerous situation or not be able to get themselves out of a dangerous situation. And so if that is met, then they can get 24-hour paid-for care. It's not quite true, because if you figure out California has a maximum on the amount of IHSS that you get paid, it's 283 hours if you're what they call severely impaired. And if you do the math, that's not 24 hours a day, but we'll just go with their strange division. But the idea is that you're someone who, or the consumer is someone who needs someone by them at all times, and that they are physically able to put themselves in danger or not be able to get out of danger. And so common things are, and might be more interest here, people who, they might run into the street, or might eat or drink things that are toxic, might try to burn themselves, might do something dangerous. However, it cannot be on purpose. So that's the big caveat. This is not meant for people who are purposely self-injurious, who exhibit cutting behaviors or potentially suicidal behaviors. The other things it can't be for are things like just trying to be friendly, like social activities. We all know that there are definite problems if a person doesn't get enough socialization. That's not enough to get protective supervision. And it cannot be in anticipation of a medical emergency. And so, and that's another one where there's often a debate. But it really comes back to, is it the person's impairments related to judgment and insight that are causing the problem? Or is it that they need medical care? And that can be a fine line, but that's where you and or your advocates can help you, both with the county and if the county disagrees, moving on to appealing their decision. The other one I want to make a relatively quick description of is the paramedical services. Paramedical services, unlike the rest of IHSS, which is very non-medical, the idea of IHSS is that it is a non-licensed provider who is providing this service. Paramedical services are ones that are things that could be provided by a medical provider. However, in these cases, they get training from a licensed healthcare professional and then provide those services for another person. And these are things, I mean, we're not talking about doing surgery, but we're talking about giving insulin or wound care, changing bandages, things that require some amount of training and medical understanding, but that you don't need a license to do. And as it tells you, you do have to have a licensed healthcare professional sign off that the provider in this case has those skills and that this is needed for them. All right, so you've gone through all of that. You filled out all of those gigantic packets. You spent 2 hours meeting with the social worker. I wish they don't spend nearly that long. You went to your doctor turned in all the forms. Now you get a notice of action from the county. County says, either we approve you or we deny you. We'll say, optimistically, we approve you. You are eligible for IHSS, and we find that you need X, Y, and Z. And they will be nice if I had a copy of one of the notice of action. But they actually have every single type of potential service and exactly how many minutes they believe you need. And if you've had IHSS before, they will show if it's an increase or a decrease. And at the end of the page, you get, here we go, I can safely remain in my home with 84.25 hours of services. And that's all supposedly explained in my notice of action. You should get a notice of action within 30 days. That does not always happen. You should definitely get it more than 10 days before the change would kick in. And the reason why that's important is if they're denying you a service or they're cutting down your service, as long as you put in an appeal before the service gets cut off, you can request aid paid pending. And so now we get to the second point that I want everyone to remember. Point 1 was document, document, document. Point 2 is appeal, appeal, appeal. And appeal early so that you can request aid paid pending. Because what that means is even if they find that you only need half the hours that you used to get, until the time where you go before a judge, you keep getting that full amount of hours. And you have an opportunity with your family and your advocate to argue for that amount. And you don't have to get dropped down to that lower amount while you wait what is sometimes months to go see a judge. All right, so other information that's on the notice of action. The time that they made that decision, the approval date or the denial date, the effective date, when this will start happening. That's the date before which you want to get your appeal in. Any information about, which task at which hours or how they made that decision. That's a little bit more optimistic than I probably would be. Although they may discuss why they made a particular decision, it often is not very clear. It's often very general. They will describe certain things like if you, for example, say there are 5 of you in your home, they are required to reduce the number of hours based on how many people are there for certain things. For example, domestic services, if there are 5 hours needed to clean the house and there are 5 people, they will generally only give you 1 hour because they consider that your portion of the domestic time. So that part is very clear. Other things are not quite so clear, particularly why you may meet or not meet the requirements for protective supervision. May not be very clear in your notice of action. It also includes information about aid pending and information about how to request a hearing. So then we move on to, all right, so say you didn't agree with what they said. Say they turned you down. They said, I don't think that you need IHSS, you're ineligible. You go to point 2, appeal, 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 and you get all your information together. Now the first step is, how do you do this? They give you a form, it's on the back of your NOA, and it just has a little blurb, and all you have to say is, I want a state fair hearing. And actually you can do it verbally. You're not required to fill out a form, not required to do anything. Although we do encourage you to give us a call or give an advocate a call before you start that process. You have up to 90 days from the date of your notice of action to request a hearing. So it's not that immediate, although it's better if you leave some extra time. At that point, if you are getting an advocate, if you want to give us a call, you can choose anyone to become an authorized representative. And so you don't have to be a lawyer. You can have your best friend be your authorized representative. And again, it's often helpful to have someone come with you if you do go to hearing. You'll turn in your thing. They'll send you something saying, oh, we see that you've requested a state fair hearing. If you authorize another individual to speak for you, they'll include that. You're supposed to notice the hearing at least 10 days before the date. If you are doing it that way, they will do that. If you do request an attorney or some kind of other representative, that can spread out that timeline a little bit more. But at that point, it becomes more negotiation. But say you're going by yourself, they have to tell you at least 10 days before. 2 business days before the hearing, you have a right to go to the county office and get their position statement. That is their brief, their description of why they think you do not, in this case, you are not eligible for IHSS, or why you're not eligible for protective supervision, or why they feel you only need 2 minutes a month to go to the doctor. And that is all supposed to be included in there, as well as their witness list and any supporting documentation that they have, whether it be notes from the social worker, things from the medical records that you may have submitted. That'll all be available. You do not have to give your position statement 2 days ahead of time. Although, I suppose you could say it's polite, but you're certainly not required to. You do want to have it the day of the hearing, and make sure you have at least 3 copies of it. You will have to give 1 to the judge, 1 to the county representative, and you should have 1 for yourself to go over. There's no reason not to make more other than, trees and all that, but have at least 3. So you go to the hearing, and an ALJ will administrative law judge will listen to both sides. At the end of the hearing, the judge will take the information. It all gets recorded, and she'll go home and she'll make a decision. She has 90 days with which to make a decision. It doesn't always take that long, but it can. And then you will get a copy of the decision. All right, so I went to the hearing, and then I lost again. You have a right to request a rehearing within 30 days of an adverse hearing decision. There's really no reason not to request one, although honestly, I'll tell you, They're not often granted unless you have a good reason why something was wrong with your first hearing. But you don't lose anything by requesting one. And again, I would encourage you to, give us or legal aid or anybody that you wanted to a call to help with filing that. And for a year after that, you have a right to file a writ of mandate, which would be a legal action specifically based on that the administrative law judge made a decision that was not substantiated by the facts, that ignored evidence that was presented. The problem with this is that, one, you do need a lawyer at that point, although you can represent yourself, but you cannot have a non-legal representative. But also that you cannot bring new information. At a rehearing, you can bring in whatever, it's like starting all over again. So that's why it's great. But going to the writ process, all you have is whatever information was presented at the hearing. And so you have created a record, and that is all the judge is going to listen to. So something, when we decide whether a case is good for writ, we're looking at, is there enough evidence on the record to show that the judge really acted beyond her jurisdiction? Or would it make more sense to take all this new information that the person has gathered and apply again? Because sometimes it shows up, wow, look, I have these great letters from my doctor. Well, did you have them at the hearing? No, I didn't. Then you're not going to be able to admit them. So that may be helpful if you want to reapply, which you can do at any time. And you can ask for a reassessment at any time, by the way, if you feel that there's been a change in your needs. I should have mentioned that. You get a reassessment once every year, but say you have a disability and some of your needs are getting worse, or you care for someone, care for your father and providing things, and then he has a stroke, and now he needs way more care than he needed before. Call the county out. They're required to come out and do a reassessment. But that's also what can be a fix for some people if they have new information they want to bring to the county's attention. The downside is when you're appealing an action, if you win, you will get back hours, back to the date that you applied. If you apply again, it all starts from your new application date. So you have to weigh those two issues. I want to end with just a few kind of trends in the IHSS program and things that we've been noticing. One is people who move from one county to another. This is a county-run program, and counties are different. And sometimes people will move across county lines and suddenly they have half the hours. Now, unless something's drastically different, that doesn't make any sense. However, it's a whole new assessment process, and it may be there's some specific issues that are worth talking about. And we really encourage people who have that issue to give us a call. We have offices all over the state, obviously here in Sacramento, but also in Oakland, Fresno, Los Angeles, and San Diego. So that's one thing to look for. The other is, as you may have heard for any of you who are IHSS providers, last year, or I guess September 2013, the Obama administration put in a new rules for overtime for home care workers. And California was going to go ahead and implement those rules. I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but for a while there was going to be rules about how many hours an individual provider could work. Because at that point, the state was going to have to start paying overtime, which it had not done and does not currently do to individuals who work in personal care services. So when they were considering paying that overtime, the state's idea was to cap the hours that any individual worked so they wouldn't have to pay more than a certain amount of overtime. Now, a couple months ago, a federal judge put an injunction on the federal part of that act. So California said, all right, well, if the federal thing isn't moving forward, we're not moving forward either. So we're back to the drawing board if there's no overtime. However, we expect the Department of Labor, actually, they've already appealed that decision. It will probably go to the Supreme Court. Whenever that comes down, I fully expect them to come back again with discussions of how they're going to deal with overtime. In something that a lot of people have questions with, on the back of the NOA, it talks about either, depending on when you got it, 8% or 7% across the board reduction in hours. What does that mean? That comes from a settlement agreement that DRC and other organizations negotiated a few years ago during the recession. The state decided it was going to do across the board cut of 20% for all IHSS. So say you had 100 hours that you were found to need to stay safely at home, you would only receive 80. So after a lawsuit and a settlement, they agreed to 8% and then dropped down to 7% this year. There's really nothing you can do about it. I mean, if you filed for a hearing on that, this is the exception in my point 2. If you file for a hearing on that, it will be dismissed unless there's a mathematical error. Like if they actually took the 7% wrong, you could argue that. Or the one exception is some people have unmet need. You know, I mentioned before that California has a maximum amount of hours that you can get. That's 283 hours a month, but that's not 24 hours times 30, so you can figure it out. So if they find, say, that you really need 320 hours to stay home, they are required to take that 7% out of that extra, whatever that is, 37 hours. So it can be some fun little math to make sure they've done that correctly, and that is something to discuss. But that's pretty specific, so if you have a question about that, feel free to come talk to me.
So I'm going to wrap up with a very quick overview of regional center services that are the types of supports that are available through the regional center. So within the regional center services available to people with developmental disabilities as far as housing supports go, facility-based options are probably the most commonly known options, everything from board and care to intermediate care facilities to, on the extreme end, developmental centers. Developmental centers are really, it would be incredibly surprising to find someone today who was determined to need that level of service. The type of services that someone would be referred to within a facility-based kind of model is very much determined on the type of supports and level of support that someone would require. We actually, you may have noticed that we had a couple of people who requested to come and provide some information about services outside. The Family Home Agency is one that I had called because it's an interesting model and one that many people don't really know a lot about. In a family home agency, when I describe it, people oftentimes say that that's kind of like foster care. But the idea is that up to 2 people with developmental disabilities could live with a family who would share their home, their food, and supervision that would go within that. And so it's very much a community kind of model. The families, in this case, the families are recruited and vetted by an agency that's funded by the regional center, and the families are paid for their service, while they're providing providing that service to someone. I've known several people who have used family homes and have had very good reports from people who have used that model. Independent living is an option for people who have fairly low support needs. Due to the number of hours and the number of visits that people have within independent living, it's generally a service that's again, dedicated to people who have low support needs. And by and large, people are expected to learn and eventually do the majority of types of tasks that will be required day to day within their home. If the person does have a physical or other type of need and can't do the physical types of activities that are required within the home, they can use in-home support services within independent living model. The one thing that I would mention about that is the fact that again, the majority of oversight and instruction that happens within the independent living model is provided on a week-to-week basis by the independent living instructor, who would come, between one to I think it's pretty unusual to see, someone there 3 times a week. And so if a person is going to be using in-home support services, aides, as the person who's doing those types of tasks, they still need to have pretty low support needs as far as managing those in-home support service staff. So again, when you're looking at independent living, it's primarily a model that is there for people who have relatively good skills and relatively low support needs. Within independent living, the regional center can pay for instruction in issues such as cooking, doing laundry, planning meals, buying groceries, managing money, budgeting, balancing checkbook, getting around in the community, bus training, making medical appointments, and a variety of other tasks. And again, the initial part is oftentimes dedicated towards instruction, and eventually we'll move more towards supporting these types of needs. Within independent living services, when I've talked to people about why they have chosen this model, one of the things that people oftentimes cite is the fact that they get to pick the specific place that they're living. They get to pick, obviously, the meals and activities that they're doing, and they just have more autonomy than they may have in a group facility model. Oftentimes, people within this model, for financial reasons, they're going to have a roommate. But within this model, people have the complete choice to choosing who they live with. Whereas in a facility base, they oftentimes don't have that choice. Some regional centers, for a very long time actually, including our local regional center, the Alta Regional Center, have for a long time offered a service very similar to independent living skills training for people who actually aren't planning on moving out anytime in the near future. Starting in January of 2015, the regional centers by law are required to offer independent living skills services to people who do not have a plan to move out. And there's a question about, well, why would you do that? Why would you be providing that service if the people aren't planning on moving and living independently? And the couple of things that I have talked with families who have used this service is the first one is that within some communities and some cultures, people live in intergenerational homes, and there's not an expectation that everyone moves out. And so within that model, being able to develop your skills will not only allow you to be a contributing member within the house, but also it helps people to demonstrate their abilities, and oftentimes will help people to have more options within their house and just be more productive in their lives. And the other thing that I like to emphasize is that through using this service, people who, again, this point in their lives have no intention, no thought that they would move independently, that later on, when the time comes that they may change that they would have developed these skills over time. So I think it's a very valuable service. Supported living. Just as there's a continuum within the facility-based model from board and care facilities to intermediate care facilities to developmental centers, supported living is in many ways a continuum of service for people who may require more supports than would be available through independent living services. Unlike independent living services, though, supported living cannot be received when you're still living with your family. That is not an option. Independent living services can be received while you're still living at home and don't intend to move out. Supported living, that is not an option within this model. The types of supports offered within supported living are offered as long as are needed, as often as are needed, and the supports are flexible and change as the person needs change. And so supported living is a much more dynamic kind of supports model, again, for people who have more complex needs or require more supports. And the other thing is that it's important to know that supported living is available to anyone, regardless of the severity of their disability. There's not a severity of disability that's supported living by the disability. The severity of the disability by itself cannot preclude people from getting supported living. And that's a very important point. Many people who I've talked with are unaware. They feel that the level of disability would be too great to be served within this model, and that's not the case. As a matter of fact, many of the people who move from developmental centers, who have lived in developmental centers for many years and have the most complex needs within our state system, when they move out, many of those people are served directly by supported living as compared to facility-based services. This is a standardized, part of a standardized questionnaire that's used to determine the level of supports needed within supported living. And I pulled this out because I really wanted to highlight the type of things that can be supported within supported living. There's one of the things that's assessed is the level of medical supports that a person would require, the level of behavior supports that a person would require, the supports that are required for personal care, including transferring, toileting, feeding, the safety concerns that Ann was talking about through IHSS, overnight supports if they're required, and financial management. So by the way, much of these types of supports, the regional center does not pay for all of these supports. Part of this is using the in-home support services, which is a generic resource that the regional center will braid those two, their funding along with in-home support services funding, so that people are receiving the services they require, but not everything's coming out of the regional center's funding, which is a very, very appropriate model. The nice thing about supported living and the people who I have worked with is the fact that, again, the amount of support that's within the home that is provided through the regional center agencies is much more frequent. And so the ability to manage in-home support service staff is quite a bit larger. And I think that's a significant thing to note. Another part of the standardized assessment is taking a look at to make sure that the level of support is appropriate. And that is to make sure that it's not too low, but it's also to make sure that the level of support is not too high. One of the things that is, and again, I think that this is a very appropriate thing, is that, as people become more acclimated to living on their own, their support needs will change over time. And so there will be, adjustments throughout the time that people are receiving services. Some of the things that that is assessed during this part. Does the individual assist or supervise household duties to the fullest extent possible? Does the individual assist or supervise in meal planning, preparation, and cleanup to the fullest extent possible? Does the individual have the opportunities to increase in abilities? Again, are they increasing their amount of contribution if possible? Does the person who's receiving services utilize public transportation if that's a possibility? Does the individual spend any time with support staff? Prior to receiving supported living, did the individual spend time in his or her home or community alone? And again, they're looking to make sure that if the person has that ability, to make sure that that same opportunity is afforded to them when they're receiving supported living. Has there been attempts to fade the level of support over the past year? And again, that could be a problem if it's overemphasized. But on the other hand, it really is an appropriate question to ask. Can there be fading of the amount of support that's offered? And then, does the person have overnight staff? And oftentimes within supported living, one of the things that is looked at is the possibility of whether or not two people with disabilities could be supported in either the same apartment or living in adjacent places where the support staff could support two people. One of the things that's important to recognize is that although that's a preference, there are situations where that is not possible and not appropriate, and there are people who live in their own apartment and have all the staff directly towards them. But again, that's not a preference. That is out of necessity. This is from the DDS site, and this is the eligibility requirements, or eligibility, requirements for receiving supported living. And you'll notice that within supported living, the minimum age that someone could qualify that for is 18 years of age. That they have stated, or that a representative or their IPP team has decided that supported living is the preference, the preferential setting to receive services, and that they will not be receiving services in their family's home. That again, they will be moving and living in a unit that's outside of the family, the parent's home. I guess is the easiest way to say that. And again, emphasizing the fact that the severity of disability does not preclude people from receiving supported living. The final slide is just a slide that covers how to request an IPP meeting. The basic kinds of steps is that there are obviously IPP meetings that are scheduled on a rotating basis if you're a regional center client, but you can call one when needed. The idea is that you would send, it's preferable to send a letter or an email saying that you would like to have a meeting. Be sure to be specific about the types of skills that you would like to develop, or the type of services that you're looking for. One of the things that's frequently stated within these is to make sure that there is a decision maker who's present, someone who can actually say yes, that we will approve this service, and that the regional center must hold an IPP within 30 days of receiving a notice requesting a meeting.
Yeah, my question is for any of you. My daughter does not qualify for Medi-Cal services. Currently, Regional Center has changed all their respite services to not allow medications to be given, so we have absolutely no services for respite or anything like that. Will supported living services give medications?
So now, I'm sorry, did you say that your daughter does not qualify for,
No, she's on Medicare.
okay, but receives regional center services?
She receives regional center services. She's on Medicare, not Medi-Cal,
Okay, so,
not SSI.
okay. So if she's living in her own place with supported living, there's no doubt that within supported living that medications can be assisted with that process. Now, I don't know if they will directly administer, but as was mentioned earlier, in-home support services, that's one of the things that in-home support services does, and supported living braids regional center and IHSS services together, and so within the in-home support services, absolutely, that could
She
be.
doesn't qualify for in-home support services because she's not on Medi-Cal.
I have heard that there are some exceptions, but it's generally you need Medi-Cal. But that doesn't mean you can't get supportive living services and get the assistance.
I can't
through
even
that.
get services, to give me a 2-3 hour break because she has asthma and they won't give her asthma medication if she needs to have it because regional center says no medication by respite workers anymore.
Have you
Why
asked
don't
for
we-
nursing respite? Nursing respite, that's a separate category. Ask for nursing. Sometimes
if
they
they're-
don't suggest.
If they're unwilling to do it, you can get nursing respite. However, if it is a medication that can be given by a non-licensed provider, like an asthma medication, there may be arguments that can be made with the regional center on that.
I would just like to again emphasize that Disability Rights California is my go-to in terms of questions like this. And so although Anne may not have an answer right now, it is something that if you brought this issue to Disability Rights California, they would be able to like not do a general question, but actually guide you through this process.
Our son Alex here, he's ready to move out. He tells us we're not ready, but he's ready, and I think he's ready. He can actually, he doesn't really qualify for a lot of these things because he can stay home on the weekend when we leave and take care of everything and can handle responsibilities. But he has been unable to land a job. He does qualify for SSI. Is that enough to allow him to move out? Because the job department has not come through for him.
So I've worked with many people, moving into their own place. SSI by itself is a poverty situation. It's possible to be living in an apartment with simply SSI, but that is generally with a roommate. And so that's always a possibility. Now, did you say that he receives regional center services? Okay, so that would, that could happen through independent living service is probably what you're looking at for this situation. Although, again, I wouldn't want to make that determination just from this. That would be a determination that would happen with your service coordinator. But the other part of this is that, the independent living centers and our resource for independent living is our local one. They are, even though they're a generic resource, I really encourage people to use them for a lot of things that are just really just these types of questions.
So earlier I mentioned about housing. A lot of consumers who they want to move out. They're ready to be independent. So the first step is, okay, how am I going to get housing? Well, we want to make sure that you have an income coming, and that's like the first goal. If you're not receiving SSI or if you're not receiving any other benefits besides as a site, we do ask, are you planning to work? We do provide like resources where the department we have, they work with persons who have a disability. They also help you with your vocational goals. So, they might place you in something that you wanted to work into. It might be customer service. It really depends on what field that you want to go to. So that kind of includes kind of, I don't know if that will answer your question, but we want consumer to be be ready to move in, to be independently.
And I just want to add, for people that are considering moving out, even if it's not right now, if you are low income, getting yourself on the subsidized housing lists is always a good idea, because the wait lists are often very long and they're often closed. So if you wait until you're totally ready to move out and you haven't done it, it's too late. But like they'll open up, like Placer opened up a couple months ago, just randomly. And if you happen to be there, get on the list, and then then it only costs a third of the amount you're getting from SSI. And I will add that even if you are, it sounds like, able to do a lot of things, IHSS may still be an option in terms of even just having someone come a couple times a week and have it be paid for through the Medi-Cal program, just to come in and check, make sure everything looks good, cook a couple meals. Sometimes it can just be doing things like laundry or vacuuming.
And I have a question for you. If it's already been determined in the IPP that a consumer is going to be eligible for supported living services, does it become part of that IPP to coordinate with the in-home support services, or does that consumer and their family have to go through the whole application process with your agency in addition to going through the IPP with the regional centers?
It's a separate process from the IPP, completely separate. Now, the service coordinator could certainly assist the consumer and their family in doing it, but they have to actually go to the county and do the application process.
So, okay, so then does the family get information from the regional center, what's X, Y, and Z, what's going to be supplied, and then it's up to the family to go to your agency then to find out as well? So in other words, it's not combined, it's not
they're
coordinated. You have
very
to coordinate
separate.
it yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're two separate state agencies, DDS and the Department of Healthcare Services, which is what IHSS is under, and they don't always work well together.
Does it matter what in which order should you go to the regional center first since you're already a consumer, or should you go to your agency first, or does it matter?
I'm going to let Steve answer.
So under supported living, it's not that everyone in supported living receives in-home support services. There are certain things that would make sense for in-home support services to provide. So, to me, it just makes sense that you would through the IPP process, you would find out the level of support, if it's independent living or supported living, and then that will guide the rest of the process. The one thing I'd also just like to point out is that it's not, Anne is from Disability Rights California, which is not the place that provides IHSS or in-home support services. She's the advocate who will help make sure that in-home support services follows their guidelines and actually provides the level of service that's required.
Yes, I thank you for being here. I've got a question here. I think it's not also in your tonight's subject, but it's about conservatorship. Is the DRC available, or can they assist if we need assistance in terms of arranging a conservatorship in terms of documentation? or anybody can
I
answer.
would just like to say something before I hand it over to Ann. The issue of conservatorship as well as less restrictive kind of options for parental guidance and input in their adult children's life is something that I'm really considering adding one more session to this series because it's something that I think really needs to be covered. So, but I'm going to turn it over to Ann to answer your actual question.
The basic answer is no. We represent individuals with disabilities in their expressed interest. So we would go to your child or loved one and ask them if they wanted to be conserved. And I've had maybe once in my life had a person say they wanted to be conserved. So generally we do not advocate, we won't help with conservatorships. There are other family groups out there as well as attorneys that work on that, but that's not something that is part of our mission.
But again, I would like to emphasize that there is a range of other types of arrangements that can be made that allow parents to have input. That I've heard Disability Rights California do presentations on those other levels of service. And I think it would make sense for us to add another session on that topic, just so that people have a good understanding of all of the possibilities that are available.
Okay. Just one more. With regards to the individual independent living, we already applied for it for my son. Unfortunately, it's like more than a year now that they were not able to find a house. Is there any parameter or any protocols when it comes to the due date or where these agencies can get the house or the place itself for
You mentioned independent living. You mean resource for an independent living, or is this a different agency?
Yeah, it's through the regional center.
Regional center,
and they were the
okay.
ones who actually give us the agency, or they were the ones who, kind of like process the agency. Then the agency came to us, and then it took like more than a year now, and they were not able to find a place, maybe a buddy system or things like that. So, is there any parameters wherein they need to have that within a year's time, or just have to wait until the agency can find a place for that individual?
So with our agency, because housing is one of the services that we do provide here, too. So we set up a time. We do. Everyone calls it IEP, but we do ICP, which is the individual client plan. We sit down with the consumer, write down what their goals are. If housing is one of them, then we're like, okay, what is the location that you're looking for? What is the timeline? When do you hope to meet this goal? So we make appointments with the consumer based on when they wanted to schedule an appointment, and if they are. We say that the most successful consumers who are looking for housing, they're looking for housing. They're going out there, going to talk to landlords, like, hey, do you have a vacancy available? So I'm not sure with the regional center. I'm not sure how they set up their appointments, but like with me, I have to get on with my consumers, like, hey. Remember your goal? We were looking for housing. What's going on? Sometimes I know consumers, they're like, I'm just not feeling good. It's like, okay, whenever you want to work on your goal, we hope to achieve this. And the most successful consumers, they actually go out there, also make phone calls, go look at the units. So it really depends, because we're not saying that we're trying to put it on the consumer, but that because this is their goal too, they need to participate. So as I said earlier, independent living, it's your participation.
So within the regional center system, I'm not quite sure if you're saying that. So they were referred to an independent living service, correct?
Well, we asked the regional center that, my son wants to be, to live independently. And from that process, the regional center was the one looking for an agency to top all these things. So that's why.
So, and did your son start to work with
Yeah,
an agency?
it's an ongoing process right now.
Okay.
We already seen each other. There was an intake already or assessment process. You know, we talked with the agency and everything, but the only thing I think is the housing. It's kind of difficult or kind of like to find, and they could not find a place within the area that were, you know.
Yeah, so
I think that's the main reason.
So the question I would have is, you know, if you feel that the agency is being effective. Now, if it's a situation to where the agency is actively looking, but like you said, it's more of an issue that you can't find the type of house that you're looking for or the type of dwelling you're looking for within their budget, there's not much that a different agency could do. But if you feel that the agency is not being effective, then at that point, it would be a valuable discussion to have with the service coordinator.
Yeah, but anyways, we don't talk with the agency every now and then, so I need to call them again because it's been like months that I haven't, maybe like about 2 months now, if they were having some issues with looking for the house or whatnot, so it's kind of
Yeah.
like, you know.
So, like I said, it's a valuable conversation to have with the agency as well as the service coordinator to see if it's that people aren't being responsive and following through, or if it's an issue that what you're looking for is just not going to be easy to find.
Hi, Steve. My daughter, she lives with my mom because she has behavioral problems, and just like the other person, my daughter's on medications, but no, we can't find anybody or even a home that will take my daughter because of behavioral problems. What can we do? I mean, my mom is 60-some years old. My daughter's broke my mom's back several times, and my daughter doesn't want to leave my mom, but I don't know what to do.
It's a hard question to answer in a group format. There's it's something that I really suggest discussing with your regional center service coordinator.
My worker won't do anything. I'm a client myself, and my
So,
worker won't do anything.
But
My worker won't even help me with certain things that I need help with.
So, but what I was going to say is that again, if you're looking within the facility type of model, it is often the case that it's hard to find a facility that is open, that meets the level of requirement for your daughter. One of the things oftentimes that people have found is that when they move out of asking for a facility type of model in more to supported living, that because supported living is created based on the needs of the specific person, it may be that they could find an option, a living option that would be available quicker than if you went to the facility model.
Well, she was in a care home for a while, and we had to bring her back home because she got hurt in the care home with one of the other clients cutting her forehead.
So again, one of the things I encourage people to think of is the fact
and
that
I had to move out of the home because I was living at home with her, and she was attacking me.
Okay. So, but one of the things I encourage people to think about is the fact that again, some of the people with the most severe challenges are actually served within supported living, and so again, if you're only asking for a facility type of a possibility, it may be very difficult to find a facility that can meet your daughter's needs, whereas supported living can be much more customized.
She don't want to move out. She wants to be right with her grandma,
Okay.
but her grandma
So-
doesn't want that.
So this is obviously a really complex situation that would probably best, and I'd be happy to talk with you, separately.
For people that are working with the regional center system, I do want to also make sure you know about the Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy. So for Alto, there's a clients' rights advocate and assistant clients' rights advocate for every regional center. And they're part of DRC, but they're also separate. And they work entirely with regional center consumers. So if you're having issues with your service coordinator or your worker isn't being responsive, they're a good place to start. Office of Clients' Rights Advocacy. And actually, if you call our main number and ask to be switched to Clients' Rights, they'll switch.
Hi, I had a basic question, 'cause I got a little lost in the presentation. But my question is, the skills of independent living, are those skills learned under the regional centers only? Or is there an independent living skills program that's separate from regional centers?
So with our agency, our independent living skills training skills, or
Training skills.
this is training. Okay, so we do have classes on independent living skills training. So our classes are different from the regional. So we are our own agency. So I mean, we are familiar with the regional center, but it's different. It's a different agency. We do provide a nine independent living as training. So we do have classes on those, and I'll be glad to provide you, everyone about the brochures. Our brochures are classes that we have at our agency. It will list all the information of what kind of classes that we teach to independent living.
Thank you. I'd appreciate getting that. I just had one other question. If a young adult is eligible for SSI because of a disability, then can they apply for the IHSS services if they live with their grandparents?
Sure. Yeah, they can live with whomever.
So home means wherever they live. Okay.
Yeah, it just means not in a facility.
And not in, thank you so much.
Yeah. And I realized, I wasn't very clear. IHSS is really a funding stream. It's really Medi-Cal paying for somebody to provide these services. The consumer then goes and hires providers to do it, and they can be family members. So in your example, the consumer lives with his grandparents. His grandparents can be paid to provide services that they might already be providing. There are some tricky rules when it's a minor child with their parents or a spouse. But even that, it's not automatic that you don't get it, but we need to talk it out a little.
I just had a follow-up on that question. Does that then make the recipient, the welfare program of the IHSS is still the recipient, is still the client? Mm-hmm. And then if they're paying the parent, which is in the home, that still is, the payment is still the...
You mean who gets the money?
Yeah, the person if he's paying me to take care of the services that have been deemed the hours, he is still the welfare recipient. Is that correct of that?
No, you can be paid directly from the county because you, as the provider, you have to go through a county process to become like an employee. Although you are hired by him, he wouldn't normally pay you directly.
Well, yes, and what I'm saying is that are you on a welfare program being paid by then? Is that your name is on a or is not?
You're not a recipient, no. You are an employee.
At what age can you apply for ILS, Independent Living Skills Services? And are there clients that have ILS and then kind of do well enough that eventually move into supported living?
So the first question, I'm sorry, is?
So if a client needs independent living skills and they could be taught that in the home of their parent, right, and then they kind of do well enough that do they ever graduate to having supported living services beyond that?
So I caught it afterwards. So your first question was the age that people are eligible for IHSS. So I'm sorry, for ILS. So there is the current rule where one of the categories that has been moved to the age of 22 is independent living services. But there are situations that may not be the case. So it's something that I personally, would request when you feel needed, and then if it's not approved, it would be something that I would personally check with Disability Rights California, because there are certain exceptions to that rule about the services being delayed till 22 by the regional center. The second thing is whether or not people would graduate from ILS to supported living. And supported living is actually a more intensive level of service. And so, but if a person is receiving independent living skill training in the home, in their parents' home, if the question is that after, at some period, could they move out and still continue to receive independent living services? Yes.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.